Hello and welcome to the Wealth Tech Insider. As you can already tell, I am not Danny Legrand. Today you are stuck with Peter Warren. I'm one of the directors of the Finura Group, and I've wrestled the microphone off our usual host, Danny, to talk with an old friend of mine, actually, who I've done a lot of work with in the past, and I'm delighted to have on the podcast Tony Stevens from Business Health. So many of you, if you've been in the industry for any period of time, you would no doubt come across Business Health. I consider them the OG of business consulting in our industry and really pioneered the whole concept of practice management many, many years ago. And so I can't think of a bloke who's got more experience in the trenches of working with financial advisors than Tony Stevens. So today we're going to talk through, obviously, a little bit about Business Health for those of you that potentially are new to the industry, just talk about what they do. We're going to tap onto some of Tony's considerable experience working with practices for nearly 25 years now. And really specifically, we're going to narrow in on something which we spoke about the other day, but I think's not spoken about enough. And it is really the plight of the smaller businesses in our industry, who I think are the backbone and the absolute rump of the industry. Tony knows this world intimately, and we're going to give you, the business owners, some really handy hints, particularly if we sort of steer into the FY26 business planning cycle. So with pleasure now, introduce Tony. Good to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Pete. Really appreciate it. Although you make me sound really old, and there's probably a very good reason for that, as I am. Thanks for reminding me.
We first met in 2004, I think it was. I was a BDM at Scandia. That's how far back we go. So what's that, 21 years ago? Jesus. So I'm getting old too, mate. So obviously a lot of people know you, Tony, but I think, would you just mind introducing firstly Business Health and sort of what you do, and then we can go from there.
We've been at Business Health this is our 26th year, and we've had a few people. We basically had 5 partners in the business. Bob was in Perth, Ray was in Melbourne. We still got 3 partners. Rod and Terry are both in Sydney. I'm in Brisbane, and all of us basically came from Zurich life insurance and funds management back in the day. Terry was my boss, or my boss's boss, one of the smartest blokes I've ever met, still is. I worked a lot with Rod in the administration side, Bob in the practice management side, Ray in the BDM side. So even back then, basically the thing that I think brought us all together was that we weren't necessarily product people, but what we did is we loved advisors and we loved what they did and took particular interest in the way that they ran their business. I was really lucky. One of the things Terry did for me in my very early days is I worked pretty closely with Malcolm Payne. For those of you who remember Malcolm Payne, one of the best advisors, or the most successful advisors Australia's ever seen. He was with the old AMP, and he did a lot of group work, and I was the scribe for the group work. So I got to learn a lot of stuff from him and a lot of stuff from great advisors. So I learned very early that the benefit of sharing in a group environment, the absolute honesty that advisors have in our industry, not only in Australia but overseas as well. And so what we were all interested in is not the advice necessarily. You always assume that advisors give good advice, but what it was about was how to run their business. And our motto for a very long time has been, we want to help businesses become more efficient, more profitable, more valuable. That hasn't changed. We still want to do that. We think that financial advice is an incredibly noble profession. It helps an awful lot of people. And one of the things we also want to do is we want to help, if we can help advisors become more efficient, become better, they can give advice to more people, and more people need advice now more than they ever have previously. So, what gets us up in the morning, Pete? We want to see advisors prosper. We want to see advisors be successful. We want to see the industry become a true profession. We're on the way, don't get me wrong, but we're not there yet. We want to see, kids who want to grow up to be a financial advisor, not just an accountant or a lawyer. And we want to see more people get advice because, from professional qualified advisors, because they need it. So I hope that answers your question, mate.
It's a good why. I think so much of the industry headlines and noise, that we all sort of watched on when the Royal Commission was happening, and a lot of the focus was on the big institutions, and yet we didn't really talk much about the plight of small business owners. And as you know, Tony, my dad was a small business owner for
Yeah,
his
yeah,
whole life. And my Tony actually used to help my dad when he was a financial
yeah,
advisor
yeah,
with some things. And so small business is in my blood, and still is today. I'm now a small business owner. But I guess from your perspective, that is I guess the perennial challenge for most advisors, that they wear two hats. They're a financial advisor by profession, but a small business owner, and sort of on the other side of the desk. And how do you work with practices in terms of distinguishing between the two roles, and where do you think they need to spend more time to be better
yeah.
business owners?
Well, I mean, I'm going to try really hard to answer the question, without using, terms that you use every day that throwaway lines. I think, um, I think a lot of advisors got into the business because they wanted to deal with people, and they wanted to deal with investments, or they wanted to deal with insurance, or they wanted to, uh, you know, they wanted to be advisors. They didn't necessarily want to be small business people when they started doing this, right? And to coin an old phrase, to work on the business, not just in the business. It's been used 1,000 times, but it's now 1,001, and it's never wrong, and it never gets old. So I think we used to have, we've been doing this thing for a long time, and we used to have a slide that talked about the journey. And the journey went from basically being a great advisor to being a great business person. And what are the things that you've got to do to be able to do that? And I think by recognizing that advice is incredibly important, recognizing that that's what advisors want to do. So our philosophy, I guess, and again, we're not the only ones here, but our philosophy is, as a small business owner and as an advisor, if you're seeing clients, and if you're educating yourself to know about what to talk about when you see clients, and you're working on your business with your business plan and prospecting, if you're doing anything other than those four things, then you're really costing yourself money, and you're not doing the things that make you great. So if you can outsource everything else, and again, I understand, in a larger practice that's probably easy, but the goal, I think, is to, over a period of time, when you first start out, when you first start out in the business, and Pete, you know this because you started out, when we started out, you did everything. You did everything yourself, and no one can do it as good as you can. And so to be able to recognize what you can outsource, and to be able to continue to do the things that you're really good at, that is the quintessential issue that you have to address. And as you get bigger, and as you realize that, more resources become available to enable you to do those four things. And the path to getting there can be different for lots of different people. You've got outsourcing now, you've got, employing people, you've got joining businesses together, and creating that back office. So there's a lot of different ways you about it. But I think that the primary thing is to never, you've always got to do 100% of the compliance. You've always got to do 100% of the advice thing right. But it's not good enough to be a success in today's environment, particularly if you want to be a small business owner. If you all you want to be an advisor, you can go somewhere else and do that. And I think we've seen examples, Pete, of businesses where successful business people have exited out of their business, become advisors, and been reborn again, because
Yeah.
that's what got them into it in the first place.
Yeah, they almost, sometimes the term rinse and repeat is used, but they just can't
Yeah,
help themselves.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
wired that way. But do you find that? I mean, we find probably in our technology consulting capacity that some of our best clients are often the ones that have tried and failed before they come and talk to us. And so I think the term we often use is conscious incompetence, and that's a
hmm
space I live in, breathe in every day. I'm reminded of my conscious incompetence by many people in my life.
Yeah.
But do you find that yourself, that the best businesses you've worked with are the ones that they just hit a point where the pain of not changing is so great that they just have to
Well,
do something?
absolutely correct, because, I mean, and again, you've got to go back, because what you've got to do is you've got to give these guys a rap, right? Because the reason why they get to that point is because they've been very successful doing what they're doing, right? If they weren't successful, they could keep doing what they're doing, and it would be death by 1,000 cuts. But to be really successful, and to bring new clients on board, and to have, to have a problem servicing the clients that you've got, the reason why, and Jim Stackpool, who I still love, I haven't seen him for a long time, but, back in the Zurich days, we used Jim a lot, and he used to call it the growing pains. the wobble theory, I think he called it, and again, it's the people who have a problem, or, they've reached a pain point, and they need to do something about it. And the question is, then they can either choose to do something or continue to live with the pain. And then when they choose to do something, sometimes they make the wrong choice. But at least they have a go, right? So, and again, Terry, over many years, if you don't swing, you don't hit. Right, so you've got to have a go. Now, again, I guess if you look at it from the consultant's perspective and your experience you've had over the years, sometimes it's easier to learn from somebody else. It's a lot cheaper to learn from somebody else's mistake than it is to learn from your own. So that's why I think it's important to to lean on the networks that you have and the people that you have that have experience that may have seen these things, or your peers or other advisors that have been down a similar path and have made mistakes.
Yeah.
You're still going to do it yourself, and you're still going to make that mistake yourself. But you got two young boys, Pete. My boys are a bit older now, and it doesn't matter how many times you bloody tell them. The only way they learn sometimes is to make the same mistake you made.
Yeah, you got to let them. You got to let them.
You gotta.
Do you find, I mean, because this is probably a core issue we find, is that, business owners, like, and my dad was probably like this, and me to an extent, they're often business owners because they can't tolerate working for people.
Mm-hmm.
It's generally one of the things I identify. But, so how do you, when you're sort of first engaging with a practice, how do you sort of build a rapport with a business owner to help them sort of understand that they haven't got all the answers, and how do you sort of get that balance right between not necessarily getting them to completely lose control of the business, but equally learn from some of the experts like yourself?
So I think one of the things that we learned very early on, right, was, so we've had for a long time a business diagnostic we call the health check, which is a quantitative and qualitative business diagnostic. It's online, it's pretty comprehensive, and we've been doing that for a long time. And one of the things that we toyed with in the early years was, okay, we sort of know what drives a good business, right? And with the experience we've had and with the data that we have, not just in Australia but overseas, we actually do know what drives successful, profitable businesses, right? But the problem is that if you go to an advisor, you go to any small business owner and you say, look, these are the things that you need to do, oftentimes, like, it's hard enough to get buy-in. And so what we need to try and do is we need to get whoever we're talking to buy in to a process, to do something, to implement something and get some success. And what we learned from very early on is that it doesn't matter what I want as a consultant. It doesn't matter what I see or what I think. The important thing is to ask questions and find out what the pain points, if you like, what are the things, that the advisor or the small business owners or the directors, what are the things that drove them for you to be there in the first place, and then try and address that. So I'm not very good at, those of you who've seen me before, I'm not very good at jokes. The joke is, how many social workers does it take to change a light bulb? Right? And the answer is only one, but the light bulb has to want to change.
Yeah.
Right. So apologies. Sorry. I know it's not very good and I've said it before, but again, the thing is from our perspective, we have a lot of great stuff, but unless the business owner or the directors or the advisor recognizes that they need to do something, it doesn't matter what we tell them, they need to buy into it first.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find, I mean, this is obviously a technology podcast, so I'm going to, take over the agenda to a degree and talk about tech.
Good.
One of the things we encounter with tech to a degree with smaller business owners is that they'll often associate almost every spend they make in the business almost as a dollar out of their own personal pocket, rather than the business's pocket. And I literally had an issue with a prospect yesterday who sort of couldn't get their head around our fees, and it was the emotion around it was such that it was like I was taking money out of his holiday account for the year. It was kind of how it felt. Do you find that a continual challenge with small business owners, that they don't de-link the two?
It's a continual challenge because, whether it's, like I read your stuff on a Friday, Pete. I think it's great, and you talked about, last time I think you talked about the percentage of expenses or the percentage of revenue that are invested back into technology. And I think the really key message there is investment. right? And when you're having any kind of investment, what you need to have is you need to have a view as to what the return on that investment is going to be. Now, whether that's us or whether, and I think when we caught up last week, we talked about sometimes in business, when a business is going really well, they don't need you. When the business isn't going so well, they can't afford you. So
Yeah,
it's
100%.
like you've got to get that, you've got to get them in that sweet spot, I guess. But whether it's technology, and again, I think our numbers are around about 7 or 8% of expenses invested in technology. The potential outcome that people can get from technology is the return on investment they can get is far exceeds a lot of other things, and what we're seeing is, again, there's no substitute for face to face, whether it's like this or feet under the table. There's no substitute for compliant advice, and there's no substitute for creating that relationship between the advisor and the client. But the way that's delivered, the efficiency in the way that's delivered and how that's delivered to the client has to be more and more delivered with technology. And if not now, certainly in 10 years' time, because, the kids growing up today, and I use that term loosely because everyone's a kid now, I guess. The kids growing up today, that's the only way that they're going to be able to converse. We all have to take that journey at some stage. It's just a matter of when we do it and how we do it, depending on the clients that we've got. So again, whether it's people, Pete, we work a lot with staff. We do staff surveys for advisory firms, and again, and I often, you'd point out when you're doing benchmarking, and we should talk about benchmarking at some stage. If you talk to somebody who is only a numbers person, like a numbers only accountant, and they saw that the percentage of revenue invested in staff was higher than the average, one might say, you're spending too much money on staff. But if you go back and then have a look at the efficiency, you look at the profitability of the business, you look at the staff turnover, if all of those things are good, again, what people are doing are they're getting that return on the investment of having great staff. And good staff are hard to find and they're hard to keep. So again, it's all about that investment piece, and it's all about, making sure that you continually understand what your staff are thinking, making sure that you're asking them what they think. All of the stuff that we do, all of the surveys we do, client surveys. I remember your dad did a client survey
Yeah,
back in the day.
the CAT scan.
The CAT scan.
And actually,
right.
another business I chair, Rising Tide, I think, did a CAT scan recently as well,
Yep,
and
they've
very
done many.
valuable,
They've
very
done
valuable
many.
tool.
So with all of those things, it's about the surveys are confidential and anonymous, right? So the advisor doesn't know which staff member said what. The advisor doesn't know which clients say what. And what that does, in our experience, is that allows the staff and the clients to be more honest with their feedback. So because they don't want to get someone in trouble, they don't want to tell Brian that, mate, you need to change things, because they loved your dad, but what they want, they love their advisor, and they don't necessarily want to upset them or get someone in trouble in the business, but they're more likely to say that there's an issue if they know that, they're not necessarily going to be, made responsible for that, and they're also more likely to give feedback if whoever does it, the advisory firm that does it, do something, do something about it as a result of the feedback that they get.
Have you incorporated any questions around technology into those client surveys now? We're always surprised, like when we talk to firms and we engage them, we ask them, well, have you spoken to clients about technology and what they're expecting from you?
Yeah.
And so things for us are always around, client portals and how do you feel about the advice documentation, how it's shared with you, and would you like a client portal? And very, very, very few firms have actually surveyed their clients about tech in particular.
Look, we don't, Pete, as a rule. We've been doing the survey for a long time, and even what we do we don't ask any questions about advice either, right? We ask questions around, some of the soft questions around things like trust and understanding, and we do ask questions around communication. We do ask questions around financial review process. And what our experience is that, and we've had some examples, when we're talking about communications, clients will, and by the way, every question that we ask also, we encourage the client to write something, to write a comment. And so when there's more, there's in the more recent time, there's been more comments around things like, I love the fact that I can access my information at any time through a client portal, or, other things around trying to think of something from a technology, but like being able to update my information or things around that regard.
Don't send me a spreadsheet as a fact find.
Exactly right, exactly right. Or being able to log in and view my all of my stuff before I actually have the review instead of going in cold. We've had people advisors where they've changed their financial review process, where they actually spend the first 10 minutes in the boardroom or on like this, where they're actually going through their information on the big screen or in the screen here. So again, it's making them more involved in the process. I'm looking at owning the process. So while we don't ask questions specifically, we certainly do get comments around things that are working or not working. But when we look at when upgrading the different questions that we've got, the way the advice is delivered and the way the relationship is evolving is something that is obviously of great interest to us.
Yeah, well, I mean, our sense, and we still see client portal usage quite low by international standards. So I think only a third of Australian businesses will have some form of client portal, where in the UK it's sort of the inverse. It's probably two thirds, and you might have some insight on the US because I know you do a lot of work over there. But so it sort of seems like we've been reluctant to sort of introduce technology into the client experience, but yet, here we are 20 years on, you and I, and the world's changed enormously when it comes to tech, and certain trends like COVID and other things have happened that have meant that tech's available to us, and perhaps, I don't know, perhaps clients aren't as tech averse as we thought they were. They're pretty used to QR codes and all those sort of things now, and maybe a client portal, for example, is not as scary as what we thought it is.
Yeah, and I think I've read stuff. One of the things that I think the States does very well compared to us is embrace technology, whether that's client-facing technology or back office technology. I think their take-up rate is a bit higher than ours. But I think when you read articles and you read research about things that even older people now, even older than me, Pete, their take-up of the internet and being able to do things and research things is becoming, it's becoming more the norm than what it was a few years ago. I still remember, when we started, talking about planning for the future, there was this thing coming called Wi-Fi. For all of you younger people out there, to get internet access, you had to plug your thing into the phone socket.
Yep.
Geez, I'm
Another great Australian
now.
invention, by the way, invented
There
by the CSIRO. We didn't make a dollar out of it, but now ubiquitous across the world. So
there you go. Fantastic. Fantastic. That and I was going to say, I forgot we're having a chat in front of other people, but the wine goon was also another great Australian invention.
Hey, we innovate where it counts. And I guess, I would like to bring it back a little bit to your health check data, because I would say, of all the sources of data in the industry, that has become, I would say, an almanac for the history of the financial performance of advice businesses in Australia and across the globe. And I know you track a number of key metrics, but what I'm really keen to know from your perspective is, of all the metrics, what do you see as the most important metric in businesses at the moment? And probably what has changed, do you think, in the last 20 years?
It's a good question. And I think for me, the metric that is most important is revenue per client. Now, and I think that's really important from the point of view that understanding the revenue per client, you also need to think about the cost that it is to serve that client. And things have changed over the years. I was only saying, I had a meeting this morning and we were talking about this. Like back in the old days, what you used to do when, basically there was every piece of revenue to a practice was normally a asset-based, percentage funds under management. Again, that's not to say there's anything wrong with that, not at all. But it would be, well, what does, how much money is the client bringing in? Therefore, they're an A-class client. Therefore, what services should we offer them? And things have changed a lot now. Client segmentation stuff now isn't necessarily about that. What it's about is saying, for a lot of people, it's, what level of service can we provide that's of value? What level of service can we provide that the client is willing to pay over a long period of time, where it's profitable to us and it's value to the client? Because over many years, many clients got great levels of service and they weren't paying a lot of money to the practice, and the clients that were paying a lot of money were subsidising the rest of them. Grandfathered commission sort of changed that whole dynamic, and opt-in also changed that dynamic. So revenue,
we were many ways advisors were price takers, not price
yeah,
makers. Where the price was determined by the commission from the platform, right? To an
correct,
extent,
correct.
yeah,
Which
yeah,
is sort of like where real estate is now,
yeah.
having conversations with real estate agents. Well, the Queensland, Real Estate Institute says that I should charge 4%, well, doesn't, or 5% or whatever the hell it is. So I think the revenue per client on average obviously is a really important benchmark to compare yourself to other practices that are around it. It's $3.5 grand give or take at the moment, from our numbers. But again, that's just an indicator, and I think that's one of the reasons why benchmarking your business against against other businesses in some of these key things like your technology spend, your staff spend, your revenue per client, your overall profitability are really important, because there are going to be clients, and we come across this every day in our consulting world, where there are clients in a practice that are basically costing the business when you look at how much it costs to provide that level of service. And a lot of times that's not necessarily recognised, right? Sometimes it's not known. So, and the question then becomes, okay, well, once I know that, do I really want to know that? And okay, I want to know that. And now that I know that, what am I going to do about it? And I think, and it's not one size fits all, and it's not, well, if they're not producing $3.5 grand a year, therefore we've got to get rid of them. There's a lot of other things that you can do. There are a lot of other service models now, and not just now, but in the future, there's going to be digital servicing
Yeah.
platforms that can
We saw,
service.
we saw a TiVo come out with a model recently where they want to
Exactly right.
offer that
Exactly
sort of
right.
service, right? Which is perfect for that
I think
situation.
it's an absolute. It's a fantastic model, fantastic offer. And then you've got you know high level. How many reviews a year does a client want? How many client reviews a year does a client need? I don't want more than one review a year, right? You know, so that's really important, and understanding the cost to serve and the profitability. I think are two metrics that are really, really important. But to benchmark your business on some of those key financial areas around things like, people will say, and you'll see averages about the average number. How many clients should I be servicing? Look, it's there's some numbers there, but it also depends on the service offer that you've got. A business that's got a high touch, 3 reviews a year and high touch, and they're like a concierge, are going to be able to service a lot less clients than those who maybe do one review a year, if you like. But to get an idea of that, to see how you compare with your peers, again, the benchmark. We have a product, again. Sorry for the product log people. We've also got a product called the Benchmarker, which only looks at financial benchmarking, and it doesn't just compare the average. It also compares. If you're a small business, it compares you to small businesses. If you're a large business, it compares you to larger businesses. So again, it's not going to give you the answer necessarily, but it's going to give you a framework around where you might need to move, or where you're compared to what the average is. And that mightn't mean anything to you, because you've got, you want to be better than the average, or you want to be higher, or your service model is different. Again, but without taking that information in, without having that comparison to your peers, you might, that might not be the best use of your decision making
Yeah.
process.
Well, I think data without context is risky.
Yeah,
And I think I didn't know you had that, because I think that's a great idea, because one of the things I have found in industry forums and presentations, which you and I have sat through over many, many years now, is you see these interesting stats put up by research companies, but they're often, very aggregated data, and you don't really understand what is the real
yeah,
demographic behind that particular stat. And I think you're quite right. And even as I'm an independent director of a couple of advice businesses, and so I know we are always hungry as independent directors for benchmarking, just sort of understand, well, can we objectively look at the performance of the business and KPI the staff based on the sample set of practices in our competitive world. And that's one of the businesses I chair has got 45 staff and nearly turns over $9 million. So to compare it with a small business is completely irrelevant.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Well, it is.
Yeah.
It is irrelevant, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of all the factors driving that business are going to be different, and you know what it's like. Like so, oftentimes what we actually did a roadshow a while back, and what we did is we only looked at the high revenue numbers and not just the financial benchmarks, but the other benchmarks as well. Because I mean, what it's like. You used to go, when you go to a licensee, and we've worked with a lot of licensees over the years. The good advisors in the licensee, the best advisors in the licensee, everyone wants to talk to them about what they do, right? Because they're the leading light, which is great for an ego. The leading advisors in the licensee want to be compared. They want to compare themselves to the other leading advisors in other licensees. So having a benchmark in a small group or a small peer group or whatever it is, while that's really important, what's also important is to get the external benchmarking to see how you compare with other people that you aspire to be. Not you don't always want to be you could be I think I'm trying to work out what you could be the brightest student in the remedial class.
Yeah, or the
You
or the
know,
best and fairest in fifth grade rugby.
there you go. I've been there and done that. Well, actually, I'm not sure about the best and fairest, but I've certainly been in fifth grade. Yeah.
And that's absolutely right. And I think that nuance of data, and I think that's a wonderful resource for the industry, because that's, I think, what we're starved of. And quite often I think there's a temptation of licensees to want to almost corral their data and almost ignore the rest of the industry. And I find that's a little bit short-sighted. I think there's nothing wrong with exposing your advisors to a more comprehensive data set
Yeah.
to challenge
Yeah.
them and stretch them.
Yeah. I agree, and really, you see, you see a lot of the really big businesses get to a stage where and again, irrespective of the licensee, and there's lots of great licensees out there, but when they decide that they need to do that themselves, that's when the relationship with the licensee comes under a bit of threat.
Sure. Yeah.
So for the licensee to be able to do that, and help them compare not just to their own network but to others, there can be some real ancillary benefits there for both the advisory practice and the licensee.
Yeah, well, I've always thought it's been a great missed opportunity that licensees, to provide, who sit on a lot of data of their practices, to be able to provide quite regular reporting to their practices on how they're performing, and without too much effort. They share data with the licensee, and then they can give them benchmarking performance. And, I think human nature, particularly, we're all business owners, we're all competitive, and I think people like to know where they sit.
Yep.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. And I guess to that end, I mean, talking about goals and heading forward, I mean, we're about to hit a new financial year, Tony, and I think I'm just curious, as to what are the sort of things you generally would coach small business owners. So I'm back to sort of the 1 and 2 man advice businesses. What are the sort of things you'd coach them through doing a business plan for the next financial year?
Well, I think the first point would be do a business plan, and I know that might sound a bit contrite, but I think even we talk often about we don't expect the the Harvard Business Review 75-page document. I don't know if
Like an
so
SOA?
yeah, like that's exactly right. So a one pager with what you want to do and what you want to achieve is better than nothing. But I think the really important thing is to write down what you want to achieve in the next 12 months, and what are the things that you think that you need to address. Right now, so I'm very big on that. We're also very big on measurable objectives. So, revenue, numbers of clients, types of clients, advisors per client, all of those things need to be addressed. I think if you look, there's a couple of things. Clients are the most important thing you've got. And I know this might sound self-serving, but if you haven't done a client survey and you don't know what your clients think, how can you make any fair income decisions about your client offer moving forward?
Oh, 100%. I mean,
I don't get it.
if I was an investor in a business, and I do invest in a couple, one of the first questions I ask is, how often do you survey your clients? Like, tell me what the client pulse looks like at the moment. It's the number one indicator. And so if the answer is we don't survey our clients, that probably tells me all I need to know about winning.
I think that looking at staff, you know, you, I don't think anyone's joined up in a financial planning service to do job descriptions and position descriptions and performance reviews and that sort of stuff. So whether you outsource that to someone else or whether you leverage on your network, like the PDMs and your licensee or the different things, but making sure that staff understand what their role is, making sure that they understand what they need to do a good job, making sure that they're appreciated and they're compensated fairly is really important.
Do
And
you,
then
do
in
you believe
terms,
in transparency with how the business is performing with all staff?
look, I think you have to be. Now, I know that it's probably, it's going to be, it's probably easier for a larger business maybe, but I mean, COVID, Pete, not just in financial services, but in a lot of businesses around, a lot of staff were worried that the business that they were working for weren't going to make it. To know that their job is secure and that they're going to have, a future, and also importantly to know that that the clients are going to have an advisor in the future can be really important to staff. So I guess you've got to be careful with there are going to be some sensitivities, particularly around the amount of money, the profitability and the amount of money. But I think even if it's at a high level that it's a profitable business and we're investing back into the business, we're going to upgrade our technology, we're going to hire new people. Uh, all of those things are really important, I think, to make sure that the staff know that the business is secure into the future, and the staff can then not just be confident in themselves, but confident on behalf of the business to the clients that we're moving forward. Yeah, I think so. I think to be open and honest, even like, again, apologies, but you go back to the staff survey, we are the way that you're going to make the most out of the staff, out of the client survey, is to share the results of the client survey to the staff,
Yep.
good and bad,
Yep.
and most of it's good, Pete. Most of it's really good. But if there are some things, and most of the staff, I think that support staff is currently the third highest ranked KPI, right? Clients love staff, right?
Of course they do.
And they should be given that feedback, by the way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean everything is perfect, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not about what they do; it's about the perceptions of the client.
Yeah, and I think like everything, I mean, I've always been an advocate of transparency in financial performance. So businesses I chair do that. Obviously, they're bigger, so as you say, it's easier. But even in Finura, we've done that from the start. And the lesson for us was the first time feels a bit uncomfortable. I will admit, sitting in front of your team, you're a bit like, oh shit, like how's this all going down? But then the more you do it, it just becomes part of the cadence, and then they look at it, and it's more than the relativities that are of interest.
That's right.
And the one thing I find is it then helps put some context around decisions that we make, and they almost start making some better decisions subconsciously without realizing it. If they know the business is not quite as profitable as last year, they might skip the fancy Nespresso pods and go for the Coles ones. Just little subconscious things. You'd be amazed what can happen.
Yep.
And the final one for me is the client survey being an annual event. I think, like everything, that building a feedback-rich culture, I mean, I don't know where you can go wrong. That is an approach. And I think every business should do it every year, personally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Tony, it's about time to wrap things up. But we like at Finura to make predictions, as you may be aware, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to make some predictions for our industry, who's basically been around the industry a long time, seen it all before, but I'm sort of keen to see some predictions that you might have for the industry over the next few years.
Look, I think I'm very, very positive about the future of the industry, and I think that we're going to see more younger people with a professional year, and I know, it's more difficult now, and I know that there's a lot of people, a lot of business owners out there and advisors out there who are paying for the sins of the very few. We could go on that for about an hour, but we won't. So, but I think I'm really positive about the future of the industry. I'm really positive that that small businesses are going to be able to, the 1 and 2 man business, or the 1 and 2, 3 advisor businesses that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, are going to be able to compete with the larger businesses more and more, because they're going to get good people coming in They're going to get good people coming in. Succession planning, true succession planning, not just selling your business, is going to become more prevalent. Young people who are coming in as advisors won't just want to be advisors, they'll also want to be small business owners, which I think is really important because accountants and lawyers, they've come into partnerships and they don't just want to be an accountant or a lawyer, they want to be a partner of the business. If these small businesses that we've been dealing with embrace technology, I'm glad we haven't talked about AI yet, Pete, because
No,
it
you said it
drives me
first, not
nuts.
me.
It drives me. But I think if they embrace technology, whatever that might be in the future, and therefore they need to invest, Pete. They need to invest in the technology in the future. They will be able to provide an efficient, fantastic client offer that will be the equal of any of the large businesses in terms of the client engagement that they get. So, and at the moment, I think there's a lot of businesses that are merging together to try and get that economies of scale in the short term. And again, I think that's great. But I think that even smaller businesses will be able to do that if they work on their business, if they have a plan in place, if they implement that plan, if they review that plan to make sure that they're doing the things that they need to do, and if they invest in their people and invest in their technology, whether you're a larger business or a smaller business, I think more people will engage. I think with digital advice, clients with less needs in the short term, those people will be able to be clients of an advice network, of an advice practice. And then when it's time for them to need more or qualified advice or more serious advice, then they'll have an advisor we're already dealing with. So I think that I also think that those businesses will take full advantages of the networks that they have, whether that be a licensee, an unlicensed support group, their technology users, their platforms. All of those people will be in a better position. All of those people provide things now, and I don't think a lot of advisors take advantage of the network that they've got.
Yeah, I agree. There's
So
so many
they will
resources out
take
there.
advantage of those. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing I hear there, Tony, with a very optimistic view for the future, which I think is, arguably with less competition than ever before for great advisors. I'm also hearing we talk a lot about the intergenerational transfer of wealth. I think we're going to have an intergenerational transfer of the advice industry, which is well and truly underway. And I'm certainly extremely optimistic for those young advisors coming through. I coach them all quite directly to say that they're setting themselves up for a wonderful career and more importantly, wonderful career as small business owners, which are the sort of people you and I love helping. So
Absolutely correct. Yep.
So that's a great note to finish on, Tony. So how can, if anyone in the audience is sort of curious about some of your resources, some of the tools and the ways you help practice, what's the best way to get in touch?
Look, we're on the website like everyone else, just businesshealth.com or businesshealth.com.au. All of our stuff's there. All of our phone numbers are there. Tony at businesshealth.com, email address, Terry or Rod. Again, if you've got any questions, please give us a call. Thanks for the plug, Pete. Again, very, very happy to help people, very happy to have a chat, no obligation, but please only call us if you actually want to do something.
Yep, I think that's good advice. And I think that's something every consultant would say quite openly. But as I said, massive personal advocate for the client survey work you've done. I know it's helped many, many businesses I've worked with and they now have as part of their regular cadence. And I can't think of an organisation that, as I said before, that sits on a richer bank of data about how this industry has been performing over the last 2 decades than Business Health. Well worth reaching out to the guys for their teams. Thanks Tony. Good to connect.
Appreciate you too. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for the opportunity. I think what you're doing too in technology. Again, as I said, I think it's a real key thing in the future. Congratulations on what you've built in the relatively short period of time, and look forward to working together for many years yet.
Thanks, mate. It's been a sprint, but we're up for a marathon. So
Fantastic.
so that's today's episode of WellTech Insider. I do promise you, Danny Legrand will be in the host chair for her fans who are annoyed that she's not here this time. But it's been great to be with you. Great to bring some different content to today's session. And as always, if you'd like to access any of Finura's resources, finuragroup.com, and you can access our tech health check on that website as well. So thanks, everyone, and look forward to joining you next time.